You always felt different. You saw life through a deeper lens. You asked questions others ignored. You had a hunger for meaning, a curiosity about your purpose, and a sensitivity to energy that nobody else around you seemed to understand. But every time you tried to express that part of you, it was shut down, not by strangers, but by someone much closer. Your father. He may have never raised his voice. He may have even provided, protected, and praised you. But something still felt off. You couldn't be your whole self around him, especially the part of you that was introspective, emotional, or deeply connected to something beyond logic and reason. And so you began to adapt. You buried your inner world. You toughened up. You stopped crying. You stopped dreaming. You became what he could understand and lost what made you, you. This isn't about blame. It's about clarity. Because the truth is, your father may have blocked your spiritual growth without ever realizing it. Not out of cruelty, but because he didn't know how to hold space for something he never understood in himself. What we're about to explore are not criticisms of your father. These are 6 deep, often invisible signs that your spiritual path was detoured by a father figure who simply didn't know how to support the deeper parts of you. And if you recognize these signs in your story, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're finally waking up. And that's the beginning of everything. He dismissed your inner world as imagination. You sensed things. You felt things others didn't. You had dreams that felt real, emotions that felt massive, and insights that didn't come from books, but from deep inside you. And every time you tried to share them with your father, you got the same response. Stop overthinking. You're too sensitive. That's just your imagination. And so, little by little, you stopped sharing. You stopped trusting your gut. You began to doubt your intuition. The part of you that could tap into higher consciousness, that could read the room without a word being said, got locked away like it was a flaw, not a gift. That dismissal didn't just silence your voice. It disconnected you from your inner guidance. You learned to ignore your feelings, to suppress your awareness, and to rely only on logic and facts. But spiritual awakening doesn't come through logic. It comes through listening to yourself. By labeling your emotional depth as exaggeration or weakness, he unintentionally taught you to mistrust your own experience. And that creates a split inside. One part of you that knows, and one part of you that keeps asking for permission to know. This split delays your spiritual growth because you spend more time seeking external validation than tuning into your internal truth. But here's the twist. The very thing he called too much is the doorway to your awakening. He only respected strength, not sensitivity. To him, strength meant not showing emotion. It meant pushing through pain, staying silent during struggle, and never asking for help. So you learned the code. You toughened up. You stayed quiet. You buried your softness under layers of armor. But here's the truth. Sensitivity is not weakness. It's spiritual intelligence. It's the ability to feel energy, to connect deeply, to sense what's not being said. Sensitivity is the antenna that picks up on the frequencies others miss. And when you hide it to fit someone else's definition of strength, you end up losing access to one of your greatest gifts. Your father might have thought he was preparing you for the real world, but in doing so, he unknowingly blocked your access to emotional growth, inner healing, and higher consciousness. Because spiritual growth requires vulnerability. It requires being honest about pain, about fear, about not knowing. By teaching you that only stoicism deserves respect, he made it harder for you to trust your emotions, to cry without shame, to be soft without apology. And without that emotional freedom, your soul remains in lockdown. If this resonates, don't judge yourself for how long it's taken to undo this. It takes courage to redefine strength, and even more courage to allow your sensitivity to rise from the ashes. He modeled emotional disconnection. Your father may have never said it, but you felt it. The wall, the distance, the emotional gap. Maybe he was physically present but emotionally absent. Maybe he shut down instead of opening up. Maybe he never told you how he felt because he didn't know how. And without realizing it, you learned to do the same. You numbed yourself. You laughed things off. You distracted. You avoided hard conversations. Because that's what you saw. And what we see growing up becomes the script we live by. But spiritual growth requires emotional connection. Not just with others, but with yourself. You can't grow into your higher self if you're not even allowed to feel. You can't evolve if you keep avoiding your wounds. Your father's emotional absence may have taught you that emotions are dangerous, messy, or unnecessary. But the truth is, emotions are the gateway to transformation. When you feel deeply, you awaken. When you allow pain to surface, you heal. When you cry, you cleanse. But you can't access any of that if you've been programmed to stay numb. Your awakening begins when you stop repeating his silence and start rewriting your story. He only valued what could be seen or proven. If your father only acknowledged hard work, academic results, money, or physical achievements, then anything internal, your intuition, imagination, dreams, or spiritual insight might have seemed invisible to him. And if it was invisible, it wasn't valuable. But spirituality is the invisible realm. It's the inner voice. It's the energy behind the action. It's the meaning behind the moment. And if your father only saw value in what could be measured or explained, you were subtly trained to ignore the parts of yourself that couldn't be. So you learned to perform, to produce, to prove. You became obsessed with achievement, chasing success to feel seen. But no matter how much you accomplished, something always felt missing. Because you weren't being celebrated for who you are, only for what you did. This teaches you to abandon your spiritual self for the sake of external validation. You silence your inner world because it won't get applause. And over time, the part of you that's most connected to higher truth becomes buried under layers of performance. Waking up means learning to value what your father didn't. It means honoring your dreams, your stillness, your emotions, even if nobody else ever did. He feared change and punished individuality. Fathers who fear change often fear their child becoming someone they can't control. So when you started thinking differently, dressing differently, or believing differently, it threatened him. And instead of curiosity, he responded with criticism. He didn't realize he was shutting down your identity. He just wanted to keep you safe, or more likely keep things familiar. But spiritual awakening is change. It's growth. It's evolution. And if you were punished or mocked for being different, then you were taught to fear your own expansion. You toned yourself down to avoid conflict. You stayed quiet to be accepted. You traded authenticity for peace. But the cost was your growth. Your journey back to yourself begins when you stop apologizing for being different. When you stop asking permission to grow. When you stop shrinking to protect someone else's comfort zone. You are not meant to stay the version of you that made him feel in control. You're meant to become the version of you that sets you free. He made love conditional. This might be the hardest one. If your father only showed warmth when you obeyed, succeeded, or made him proud, then you learned love as a reward, not a given. And that creates a deep wound. A wound that makes you question your worth every time you fail, fall behind, or take a different path. A wound that tells you, if I mess up, I'll lose love. That mindset kills spiritual growth. Because awakening requires failure. It requires falling apart. It requires risk. But when love is conditional, you don't feel safe enough to evolve. You choose approval over alignment. You become who they want instead of who you are. Spiritual awakening is messy. It doesn't look like a perfect report card or a polished resume. It looks like crying at 2 a.m., questioning everything, and rebuilding your life from the inside out. And if you grew up with conditional love, that process feels terrifying. But here's the healing. You can love yourself unconditionally now. You can be the parent to yourself that your father didn't know how to be. You can give yourself permission to grow without needing anyone's applause. If you saw yourself in even one of these signs, know this: you are not alone. Many people are waking up to the silent patterns that shaped their childhood and realizing they're not broken, just buried. You were never too emotional, never too deep, never too strange. You were just early in your awareness, early in your calling, early in your awakening. And now you get to reclaim it, all of it. Spiritual growth doesn't mean rejecting your father. It means understanding how his limitations shaped you and choosing to grow beyond them. It means recognizing where the cycle stops and where you begin. So if this spoke to your soul, thank you for watching till the end. I know this wasn't easy, but you stayed. You felt it. And that alone shows how ready you are. If you're on this journey of awakening, healing, and becoming, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes one video can spark the exact realization we've been waiting for our whole life. You deserve to grow. You deserve to heal. And you deserve to come home to yourself.